Hey nerds, and welcome to Supergirl, Theories and Conspiracies. I'm Brian from Good Nerd, Bad Nerd. So this week on Supergirl, we had an episode dealing about fathers. And on one hand, we had a really great father, and on the other hand, we had a pretty terrible one. So first, we had John's dad, who by all accounts was a really great dad. And then he got tortured for 200 years, and so that's why he doesn't recognize John. He thinks it's a trick. He's really suffering some severe kind of PTSD, you know, and other issues from the torture and the kind of centuries of isolation. But, you know, he does kind of come around, snap out of it, and realize who John is. And so we have that relationship. But then we also have the relationship of Maggie and her dad. And despite being, as Maggie describes, a good dad when she was younger, he just turns out to be a really terrible person. So that was I don't know, it was hard to watch, and I think that was the point. It was supposed to be hard to watch, but so those were the two dads we had this episode. Now, Maggie's dad was hard being to watch, and Alex kind of totally missed the significance of it, and she assumed that the reason Maggie didn't want to have kids was because of the relationship with her father. And we can see that this is still going to be an issue moving forward, despite the conversation that Maggie and Alex have, where Maggie's saying, "Isn't what we have enough?" And Alex seems to reluctantly agree, but it's very clear that that's not going to be the case. This is going to be what, you know, like I said last week, the driving wedge between them that is going to separate them. And Maggie will either request a transfer, or something will happen that she's going to have to leave the city, because otherwise they would still be running into each other on a regular basis. They would still have to be working with each other, because their line of work does cross over quite frequently, especially in this city. So that's kind of the direction that they're going. And I think the show's been very upfront about that. They're not going to kill Maggie off. That would be an awful thing to do. And like I said, they're not going to do that. It is going to be this issue with kids and what both of them want in their life going forward. So moving into kind of the mythology and the lore that was presented this week, specifically the Martian mythology. Now, we learned a lot about one of their gods. Now, the Martian culture was a polytheistic society, so that means they had more than one god. But the god we learned about this week was named Haronmir, and he was the god of death and fire. Although, depending on which translation, because I guess there are different interpretations of this god, he's also considered the god of light and life, but most commonly referred to as the god of death and fire. Now, they're kind of the end of Martian civilization, and all life on Mars is associated to something called the plague or the curse of Haronmir, where there was essentially this event that wiped out all Martian life on Mars. John wasn't there at the time because in the comics he was pulled through space and time to essentially to the future on Earth, and skipped a couple centuries on Mars when all this took place. Despite the name, this wasn't a curse or plague brought on the Martian civilization by Haronmir. It was actually something that was done by John's twin brother, Malafalak. I'm hoping I pronounced that right. But he's his twin brother, and he's really a psychopath, a terrible character, and really evil. And he's very likely a character that we are going to be seeing in the future as we're learning more about John and his family, and now that John's dad is on Earth. So that brings the question of what is the future of Marin, or John's dad? Well, he can't just be hanging out in John's apartment all day, so he's probably going to take on one of two different roles. One, just kind of a advisor role within the DEO, but more likely, and this I think would be something that would be really cool to see, is we're going to see him taking up some sort of a teaching position as like an astrophysics teacher or an astrology teacher or even astronomy. He's got vast knowledge of how the universe works, and he's clearly a very wise individual. So he could take on this kind of role of teaching and find a life where he can pass on his knowledge to future generations. That seems very likely, but it's not going to last very long. Like I said, Malafalak is the character in the comics, John's twin brother, who was responsible for the genocide on Mars. And I think we're going to see something similar, not necessarily happen, but something similar attempt to happen. Now, John and his dad and Kara took the staff of Haranmir to Earth. I think Malafalak is going to come to Earth to try and find the staff, and in doing so, he's going to end up killing his father. Whether he escapes with the staff or not is yet to be seen, but it's possible that he won't, and he'll be locked up at the DEO, or he will, and everything on Mars is going to be wiped out, hopefully with Magan surviving. But at the moment, it seems like that's kind of where this is going. So let me know what you guys think. Do you think we will be seeing Malafalak make an appearance in the show? Is that something you'd like to see? If you're not familiar with the character, you can get a good introduction to him in the DC animated film Justice League Doom, which, interestingly enough, the actor who played John's dad, Carl Lumbly, he voiced Martian Manhunter in countless Justice League animated stuff. And in Justice League Doom, he voiced John and Malafalak. So that's a nice bit of trivia there, and that's why his voice seems just so perfect for playing a Martian. But let me know what you guys think. Leave your comments down below, and don't forget to check out my other theories. We've got Flash still going. Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. isn't back yet, but stay tuned for that. And until next week, I'm Brian from Good Nerd, Bad Nerd, and this has been Supergirl, Theories and Conspiracies.